The last thing I want to show you around props is how we can receive other types of values as well. So inside of child props right here, let's say maybe we want to communicate down some additional kind of prop like a callback function. Maybe our child components have buttons inside them and we want to tell the parent component about whenever a user clicks on those buttons. So let's try first adding in a button element to child and child as FC. I'm going to first begin by giving myself just a little bit of space. I'll then add in a button with text, click me. I'll add on a on-click prop, and then we'll assume that we're going to receive some kind of on-click prop. So I'm going to put in on-click like so. I'm going to copy that button down to the second component as well. There we go. Now I'm going to make sure that I try to destructure out of our props object some kind of on-click function. We'll put in on-click and on-click. Right away, we of course get an error message because child props is not expected to ever have any kind of on-click property. So to fix that up, we could very easily go back up to our interface, add in on-click, and then say that this should be some kind of function. Because it's an on-click kind of callback, we might not want it to have any kind of arguments, and maybe it might not need to return any kind of value either. So I might annotate its return type as void, which just means I do not really expect to get back any kind of usable value from onClick. So if we save that, we could now very easily see that we've got an error coming from parent.tsx. If we go back over there, not unsurprisingly, we've got an error from child right here. And it says we have to provide an onClick prop. So we could very easily put in onClick, put in a function, and maybe for right now, just do a console log that says clicked, like so. And that appears to fix the error up. All right, so again, just a very quick example of how we can add in other types of values to a props interface definition. Now, very last thing I was going to cover in the next video, but because this one has been very fast, let's just go over this one last little topic. You might recall that we have these two different types of ways of associating a props interface with a component. So this is kind of method one right here, which was a little bit easier and faster to put together, but has some downsides. And then we've also got method two down here as well. There's one other benefit to method number two down here that I just want to mention very quickly. Back inside of my parent component, I'm going to find where we currently are defining that child component right here. And I'm going to expand this thing to have both an opening tag and a closing tag as well. Now, as soon as I do that, you'll notice we start to get an error message. The error message, if you mouse over, says this right here, that is the arguments or the props we are providing to the child component, is not assignable to something, something, something. And it says specifically property children does not exist on type something, something, something. A quick reminder on what really happens when you write out a custom component using an opening tag and a closing tag as well. If you put any content in between these two tags right here, be it some kind of text or some kind of component, let's say maybe, who knows, some component called app or something similar, all that content will be provided to your component as a prop called children. This is an automatic feature in React. This has nothing to do with TypeScript or anything like that. So for right now, I'm going to just put in some arbitrary text like that right there. So again, by default, this text right here would show up inside of our child component as a prop called children. And the reason we are seeing an error, because our child definition right here says that we are going to receive some prop of child props. And there's no mention inside of here whatsoever of any kind of children prop or anything like that. So whenever we make use of child right now, the expectation, according to the interface we put together, is that there will never be any children whatsoever. Right now, we are providing a children, and so naturally we end up with an error message. So the nice thing about using this second form of definition or type annotation for a functional component is that it automatically takes into account that idea of receiving children. Let me show you an example of this. Back inside of parent.tsx, rather than trying to import child right here, I'm going to import our other component, which we called child as FC. I'll then update our JSX. And then you'll notice, oh, I need a capital C on there, my mistake. You'll notice that error message goes away very quickly. That is because child.fc, which is annotated using this React.functional component interface, does in fact expect to receive a children prop. Now we could receive children on our list of properties right here, and we could place children somewhere inside of our component like so, and we get no errors whatsoever. So that is another upside to using this approach. You can define components that will receive children. If you use the first approach, you cannot directly receive children unless you manually add an annotation to your interface right here. So we could have added in something like children and then put in some kind of type right there to say, hey, we do expect to receive children. But of course, that does require just a little bit of extra work. All right, so we've now seen some upsides and some downsides of both approaches. Now that we've seen and gotten a pretty good idea of how we can annotate props with TypeScript and React, let's move on to our next major topic in the next video.